to discuss his current Kickstarter project, Walkerman. Thank you for being here with us, John.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, can you tell us a bit about Walkerman, just in general?
It's a adventure game slash visual novel. Most of the game is in visual novel format, but it also has a isometric puzzle solving section, similar to titles like Phoenix Wright, where you're collecting items and then using those items during these nonlinear puzzle segments at the end of every chapter.
All right. So, the puzzles in the game are all about defeating the monster, as the Walkerman is basically a traveling monster slayer who has to survive on wits. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. It's sort of a different take from usually in RPGs. Your solution to every problem is you just get stronger. But I kind of like it more when you're whether it's in a video game or whether it's a comic book or a movie where the hero isn't very powerful by himself and he has to sort of get by on his wits alone. I think that's more interesting than the usual affair of just gaining levels.
All right. So, in the game, you play as a protagonist who's in the prologue just starting out uh, on his journey there. It gives a bit of a tutorial on how the world works.
Right. Most of the prologue is it gets the plot in there. I made sure to keep the plot going along, but there is a lot of exposition we have to cover and a lot of setting we have to get out of the way before we can get into the actual guts of the game.
Yeah. So, one of the key things about the monsters in the what is the name of the Walkerman world? So I don't just call it Walkerman verse.
I don't actually. Well, you can just call it whatever you want. I didn't have an actual name for the universe it takes place in. You can just call it Walkerman or the Walkerman universe.
All right. So in that world, all the monsters have specific rules that they follow, and a lot of the puzzle solving, from what I gather, seeing in the demo, is that you are trying to figure out what those rules are from research and testing. Right. Oh, sorry. The rules are relatively historic in the, it appears for some of the monsters, like it can be certain ages or just certain materials or representing different things. So what was the inspiration for that?
Old folk tales, because I really actually, when the first time I ever heard of The Witcher, that's what I thought it would be you know, a lot of going to the library and researching what you're looking at, and then maybe doing some experiments with it before you actually engage it. I was thinking of you know, a lot of the old folk tales about monsters like vampires being weak to garlic or werewolves being weak to silver bullets, is these kind of strange rules revolving around them that don't really make a lot of sense. But the problem with that is that I wouldn't really want to do that to somebody with having them hunt vampires or something, because then everybody already knows that you just have to drive a stake through the heart, show them the cross, you know, that kind of thing. So I just started creating this own kind of genre of monsters that have similar rules, but the rules are new, so you actually have to figure things out and experiment to just figure out what they're weak to.
So you have to figure out what all the monsters are weak against, and that's what a lot of the game is. However, there's also a lot of, and while that's the puzzle faction, there's a lot of talk in what you've released about also politics taking part, and a lot of foreshadowing in the prologue about that. Given the puzzles are focusing on the monsters, how are you planning to integrate that into gameplay and allowing players to have some initiative there?
Well, as I said before, it's part adventure game, part visual novel. So the monsters themselves, that's your main job. That's Jorgen's main job while he's in Midgard. That's his profession. Is he's supposed to be doing that? But at the same time, you also have the visual novel side of things, where you know, he doesn't have enough money. He needs to make connections in the city in order to eat. He has a lot of shady people trying to. I don't know if you caught some of the hints in the prologue, but you know, the Walkerman has other opportunities for things besides just defeating the monsters. So he also has other people trying to make connections with him, and that's the visual novel sort of thing. And that's how you get into the female leads routes, is depending on, you know, who you're borrowing money from, who you're choosing to team up with for certain tasks and that sort of thing.
You mentioned a female lead there. Will that lead be playable, or just a major NPC that you're interacting with?
By female lead, I mean in the usual visual novel format where you have, how visual novels work. Each one has about 5 or so female leads, and then you kind of select her route through decisions you make in the game, and then she becomes sort of your your female protagonist. But no, you're not playing as her. She's going to be whichever one you choose is going to be your main female throughout that route of the game.
All right. And so there's several different choices there. So I imagine that you're using a heavily branching story on the politics side, while the monsters side stays relatively static.
Actually, depending on what politics you're going with and what female leads you're choosing, the task that you accept is different. So the reason behind that is I wanted there to be a little bit of replayability when you're choosing the route. So, if somebody completes the game with Nora and they want to replay it with Aludra, I don't want them to have to be solving the same puzzles over and over again. So there actually is different monsters depending on the route you choose.
All right. And so there's one to two monsters per chapter, is what I understand. One major one and potentially a minor one.
There's one main monster per chapter. There is side mini games in most of the chapters, but it doesn't have to be a monster. Like I don't want to spoil anything, but it's usually not another monster. It's usually something else Jorgen has to get done, usually on the politics side of things, that plays out very similarly to how the monster puzzles are, but it's something else. It's usually not walking the night.
All right. So in the prologue, as you mentioned, there are some hints about that there are other ways. In fact, from what I gathered, the hints is the father himself got involved in some of that, and that when they moved out here, it was because he wanted to get away from that. Would that be correct?
That's left intentionally vague, but yeah, you're getting at it. But that's the reasons for leaving is a pretty major spoiler later in the game.
That makes sense, yeah. And there's also your cousin who's involved in the gangs, which is important, which is heavily emphasized repeatedly there, throughout the demo by both your father and the mysterious monster you run into.
Right. He's actually the first side thing you get into. He's your first point of contact in Midgard, and that's where things start going downhill, is once you start living with your cousin and you start getting involved with the gang that he's with.
So you said 5 major routes throughout the game?
There is, well, I don't want to say 5 major routes. It's sort of like most RPGs from the 90s. They branch out and they come back together again, and then they branch out again. I want to say there is each female lead has heavily factored into the game, but it's much more. When I say branching, the branching is coming back together and then it expanding out again. Like each chapter has you. Each chapter past chapter 2 has you going into a bunch of different directions, but it's always coming back together at some point with slight differences depending on what options you chose.
All right. So you have a relatively branching story that lets you choose a lot. How much? So you mentioned that there's going to be different tasks depending on who you align with. How much replayability are you aiming for with the game?
For each, I'm thinking there's 2 major branching options that happens. I want to say about Act 3. I don't want to say which girls it are, but there's that's like the main split of the game, and then those branches also split twice again. So for total replayability, I'd say you could probably play through it about 5 times and get different results. Well, different major results, and then you could play through it a couple more times with the minor differences between the girls.
All right. How much beyond just the plot reactivity, which it appears that you're focusing on a lot there, especially in the later chapters, is there with the more minor routes more narrative reactivity?
Yes. Well, the minor routes each have little differences in them that decide. Again, there's little mini games that aren't monsters, and those are mostly decided by what personal decisions you make during the routes is what mini game you're going to be running into.
All right. So, from what you're saying, one of George's major challenges is going to be that he is basically going out to the big city with basically nothing other than a weapon and a small pouch.
Right. Right.
So part of his challenge is figuring out how to survive in the world.
Well, the problem with Midgard is, well, you'll see more of this in chapter 1, but the problem with Midgard is it's not like modern day America or Europe or everything where it's capitalist and you can, you just get the money for an apartment and then you buy the apartment. It has its own system similar to feudalism, which is that most people are living in these houses with other people that are property of the noble kind, which are the sort of ruling class, the noble class of Midgard. And the problem with that is that if you're not part of one of these houses, you have to constantly be trying to get money and for food and everything in a society that's really designed to be more feudal based and not really running off money as much as it's running off family and status connections.
And Walkermen are almost always outside of all those connections, being the ultimate outsiders.
Right, they're not part of any of the family structure or anything. It's like being a merchant, but you need to be risking your life in order to get the coin instead of just exchanging goods and services.
And so with things like that, it's no surprise that Walkermen are approached for less savory deeds, especially given their reputation in the world that's hinted at.
Right, which is a pretty major point of the difficulty of being Jorgen in Midgard is that he has to rely on his cousin who's in a gang, or he has to borrow money from people who want him to do things for them, or similar situations to that.
Now, you mentioned that it's a largely feudal society, feudal-esque. Does that mean that Jorgen will be relying a lot on bartering? Like, will he be forced at points to choose between bartering for something for survival or keeping it because he might need it for hitting a monster's rule?
Yeah, most of the negotiations in game are not done by exchanging money. Most of the negotiations in game are done through either you're reasoning with somebody or you're bartering with them, or I mean, people they're not going to want they don't want to talk to you, but they also don't want the monsters to be around at night. So you can kind of, if you really need to, you can talk to the clergy or the noble class and kind of force them to get somebody to talk to you if you really need to interview somebody and you can't get it done any other way.
Of course, doing it that way, I imagine, will have its own consequences, with having to owe the clergy or the nobility a favor, or somebody not being very cooperative.
Right. During the investigation part of the game, during the visual novel part, the investigations take place, are the sort of lead up to the battle sequence. And depending on how you perform your investigations, Jorgen will know different things. He won't know certain things. He will either have or not have certain items. So how easy or how hard the battle is would depend on, what decisions you made during the investigation phase.
How do you challenge those types of battles and make it so that it's doable and still challenging, depending on how they did? And what happens if a person does very badly in the investigation phase of the game?
Well, it's always solvable. Like each battle has, one main sort of canon route through it, but that's like the longest route, and that would be the route you're taking if you just have no other choice. The easier items and the easier information you get, that shortens it by allowing you to skip certain sections or allowing you to know certain things, like certain options you wouldn't otherwise pick. But at the end of the day, it is a visual novel, and it is basically, you can reason your way through it. Even if you didn't do too well in the investigations, you'd still be able to complete it as long as you remember what you were doing.
All right. So the game is built using the RenPy engine, I believe, correct?
That's correct.
Why did you choose to use that engine?
Python is really the only programming language that I'm competent in. I started learning that with, I forgot his name, but there's learnpythonthehardway.org, I believe. And I started using that, I want to say like 4 years ago. And I never really graduated outside of Python. I never really did anything in C++, or I never really used Unity or the Unreal Engine or anything. So I decided that I really want to make this game, and RenPy exists, and it's actually had a lot of successful visual novels been made in RenPy. If you're familiar with Analog, A Hate Story, or Long Live the Queen, or anything by Winter Wolves, Hanako Games, or Christine Love. That was all made in RenPy. So it's not a bad engine. It does everything you might need it to with regards to visual novel type games.
Yeah, wasn't meaning to say it was a bad engine at all. I have played a lot of games in it. It's just there's a lot of options out there, so I'm always curious to hear what leads to somebody choosing an engine.
Well, ease of use mostly. It's also a very established engine. I mean, it's been around since I don't have an exact date, but I want to say it's been around for at least 5 years now, or at least 7 years. And it has a lot of people that have been using it for a long time. It's if you know Python, it's very easy to use. Even if you don't know Python, the in-game scripting is very easy to understand. So I mean, honestly, I had to go outside the in-game scripting in order to get the inventory system and everything ready. But you can make a complete visual novel, no problem with just what it gives you.
How much of an issue was it to try and get RenPy to do the adventure game side of stuff?
Uh, Mostly, well, I was mostly just using workarounds because I just wanted to get things done. But it was no problem at all. I mean, yeah, I didn't really have any problem with it. It took me maybe half a day to code to figure out how to get the inventory system in there. Probably just a few hours to figure out how to. If you played the prologue, you saw that each option has a little icon next to it, similar to like Dragon Age or one of those BioWare games where the option you're selecting has a little icon that gives you a little hint about what you're selecting. That took me like maybe a couple hours to plug in there. Other than that, I haven't had any real issues. I think it's a great system.
Cool. So it's been working out pretty well for you. So this is your first game?
This is my first commercial game. I've been modding since I was like 10, and I've released a couple of no-name games, but I doubt anyone's ever heard of them. I think it was mostly just me and my friends playing them. But yeah, this would be my first attempt at something commercial.
All right. What are those previous games?
Well, again, you probably never heard of them. I never released them or anything. This is back when Newgrounds was how people were getting in touch with each other. But Quest for the Dwarf King's Beard was one of them. I think I remember when I was 12, I made some Flash game. It was similar. It was actually kind of similar to Walkerman, but it was about rescuing a princess and playing as a sort of a Mega Man type character. But I sincerely doubt anyone still has these around. I can't find them myself, honestly.
All right. For modding, how long you've been doing that since you were 10? You said what type of games have you modded, and what do you find enjoyable about that?
I made a lot of mods for Half-Life and everything just in my spare time when I was in middle school. But recently, I made a mod for Dominions 4, which I find very enjoyable. Is making. I'm not sure. Are you familiar with the Dominions series?
I'm somewhat familiar with it. I've played a little bit of it, but I'm not someone who's played it a lot.
Well, again, having something being easily moddable is a great way to get a modding community around it. So much like when I was in middle school, I loved making my own little single player campaigns in Half-Life or making, you know, multiplayer mods, which were basically me just changing around the weapons and stuff. But Dominions 4 was, when I went back to modding a couple years ago, Dominions 4 was a very, very pleasant experience to mod because, if something, when I say simple modding, I don't mean having a suite like Unity or something. I mean, like, if as long as there's just a text file, you can go in there, change the units around, change the nations around. That to me is the easiest and the best way to mod, is just giving players, the guts accessible and just telling them what everything does and letting them go at it.
Ah, so since you've been involved in modding, let's ask what's your opinion of the Steam paid mod situation that was around and might come back?
Yeah, that seemed like a big drama bomb. I hadn't really thought about it too much, honestly. I mean, I'd be fine if it was like something like I'm sure you're aware that Half-Life 1 had some mods that were absolutely amazing. Like I wouldn't have mind paying for those. Unreal Tournament 2 had some really good mods. Something like Natural Selection would be something that I wouldn't mind paying for. But it looks like the people that were doing paid mods, like I find it kind of gross that, for example, Bethesda was letting people release paid UI mods because they didn't really have their UI under control. So somebody's going to fix it for them and then sell it, and then they're going to take a cut of that. I can't agree with that.
On the UI mod, to be clear, they were going to leave their current version up for free, and just their updated version would be for sale.
Okay, well that's more understandable. But what I don't want to get into is having people release a game that's unfinished and then having people pay to fix the things that are unfinished. That would be the worst case scenario for what paid mods might lead to.
Yeah, that was definitely one of the concerns there. And on the other hand, you had people using it basically to sell super souped up price swords on a single player RPG.
Yeah, well, that also, I mean, if you're I mean, you're paying to ruin your own game if you're doing that. I can't agree with doing that, but really, I don't know what's going through somebody's head when they buy a game and then instead of cheating, well, basically they are cheating, but they're paying to do it. Doesn't really make a lot of sense to me.
All right. So on back to Waterman, I guess. You're doing it in an episodic format. So what was why did you want to do that?
Ease of release mostly. Originally, I had planned to do it in just one go, just release the whole thing at one go. But since each chapter is easily compartmentalized, I mean, each chapter revolves around the monster that you're hunting, and that's, I mean, if it's sort of again like the Phoenix Wright series, how each court case is segmented from the other. Walkerman follows a similar pattern, and it's a lot easier for me to release it like that, and I can also get it out quicker, so people aren't waiting something ridiculous like 12 months to over a year waiting for Walkerman to come out when the whole thing's written. I just need the art assets, so really I can release these episodes as fast as my artist can produce the artwork for me.
So for the Kickstarter that you're asking for the funds for is all for the art assets?
Yes, all of it's for art assets. I work, and that's part of the reason I'm able to do this so easily is that I've been working on this for 3 years while I've been working. So it's at the point now where really all I have to do is plug in the art assets and go.
All right. So one of the things that has been a bit of an issue at times for episodic games is that they can't go back and edit something if they want to make a small tweak or it's well to iterate. But you don't think that's going to be an issue with having it already written?
I'm not. Well, first of all, I already have it written. I'm hoping to get an editor on board as well, but I don't see that as being an issue. I can go back and edit it. I can go back and change and fix grammar. I'm not sure what you're talking about when you say people who release episodic games can't go back and fix things.
Well, I meant more on a general level there than rather than a bug fixing level or such. I meant like if they wanted to change how they foreshadowed something later on, or make a slight change as a new idea occurred to them as they were working on it, because the release is already out there.
Oh yeah, well I've already done that plenty of times. Trust me, I've already gone through the phases where I have better ideas and I rewrite things and I rewrite things. Yeah, I've already gone through that. I have it all written now, and everything I wanted to foreshadow or everything I wanted to go back and fix is already fixed.
All right. So you're trying to also get onto Steam right now, and you have a green light campaign going. How is that going so far?
It's going pretty well. I mean, we're kind of losing steam here now that we're no longer one of the recent releases on Greenlight. But judging by the stats of my game versus, I don't know if you've ever seen a Greenlight or a Steam item page, but you can sort of track how you're doing compared to the top 50. And I'm doing a lot better than the average of the top 50. We've just been losing steam lately because we don't have a lot of exposure going on right now.
Yeah, I have seen them following indie games. It's percentage to the top 100, I believe it is.
It's the
And
top. Well, it's the top 50 from what I'm looking at. I don't know. Maybe
uh,
there's a way to change it.
maybe they changed it then because they've been messing around with stuff a lot there.
Hmm.
So with Walkerman, is your goal with the game?
Uh, well, first of all, I really just want to make the game. That's pretty much what I'm doing right now. Is just trying to get it out there and trying to get something completed besides the prologue. Really, just get any kind of a commercial release under the belt. Honestly.
All right. So you're asking for $9,000 on your Kickstarter, and so why do you need that much from people to get the game made?
The uh, the art is expensive, honestly. I mean, I could probably do this without a Kickstarter, but again, it would take me another couple of years to just keep commissioning things over time like that. I would rather just try for a Kickstarter, see if it can get funded, and then if it can, be able to get working on it immediately, as opposed to spending another couple of years slowly, working, then taking out a little bit of my paycheck to pay the artists, and then getting another art asset, and then waiting for release like that. That would not be preferable.
Yeah. And how is the Kickstarter going so far?
For not having any exposure, going pretty well. We haven't really had with E3 right around the corner. We really haven't had any other games journalists covering us except for Clickus. But even with that going, I've already pulled in 50 backers, and I still have about 25 days to go. So as soon as things get rolling here, I'm pretty confident I'll be able to make the first goal.
Why did you start the campaign with E3 right and the Steam sale right around the corner?
It was originally supposed to be much earlier, but I had issues with I had issues with some of the art assets. I needed to fix things really quick, so we kind of got caught on the tail end of things after a delay. So it's unfortunate, but I'm probably going to be able to power through anyways.
Yeah. So at 15K, you said that at that much you're wanting to add in additional sprites, backgrounds, and illustrations as well as other things. You're saying that it will accurately reflect its initial vision.
Yeah, that's correct. Well, again, if you've ever talked to somebody that designs games or tries to dev or mod, their initial vision is usually the thing that gets hacked to pieces before the actual release. So, when I say initial vision, that's like me, imagining gumdrops and fairy tales of all the cool stuff I could put in the game, but I don't have enough money for. But
Yeah.
that would be something like I don't know if you play a lot of visual novels.
Yes, I do.
A lot of them, they just kind of describe things. It's just kind of expected of a visual novel that, they tell you that the character sprite is doing something because they can't afford to have the character sprite have a bunch of different emotes. Like this would get me something like, instead of describing whether or not a character has their weapon on them, I would have a separate sprite for when they have a sword or a scabbard on and stuff like that. It'd also allow me to do weather effects for backgrounds, like not just day and night, but having like late evening, and whether it's raining or whether it's a hot day out. And it would lastly allow me to do a lot more CGs, which is what I find personally enjoyable of a visual novel, is when you get to see a CG instead of the sprites and backgrounds moving around.
All right. So you're planning out the first act out in November this year, if it gets funded?
Yes, if it gets funded, the first act will be out in November, but that's honestly, that's scaled back a lot. That's I would probably be able to release before that, as long as I can get my artists to produce everything on time.
Yeah, and so can you give us a little? We have the prologue available. Can you give us a bit of a synopsis of what the first act is about?
The first act is you getting established in Midgard. You're going after your first monster. Jorgen is making his mistakes. He's learning things about what the profession is like. He's meeting all the main players of the game that will come into effect in later chapters. He's meeting most of the people that are important in the game at that point, and it's also helping. It's also establishing the setting for the players. Like you go to the moot, which is basically a chapel, and you learn about what the game's religion is like. You're walking around the streets, and you're discovering what the system of serfs and nobles is like, and stuff like that. It's establishing the setting, getting Jorgen used to walking. It's explaining a little bit more about how you're doing things, and you're also learning how to investigate. And then finally, you're confronting your first monster.
Yeah, and so you're showing to show that off while establishing all these different things. Is there any sort of organization for the Walkermen, or are they all basically lone wanderers?
No, they're all pretty much by themselves. And again, you're meeting the other Walkermen. You're meeting two other Walkermen while you're in the city, and you quickly find out that no, there's not really a lot of camaraderie between them. It's kind of you're on your own type of thing.
Partially, I imagine, because they're all competing for the same business.
Right.
So, would you say Jorgen's view of the Walkerman profession at the beginning of the game is somewhat naive and hopeful, rather than accurately reflective of it?
No, that's exactly it, and that's I think that's the best way to run things. Is you don't have a 19-year-old boy showing up into a monster hunting profession with a clear mind and a very wise outlook on life. He's kind of he's kind of like any young kid might be when they're doing something dangerous like that. He doesn't really know what he's getting into yet.
So you're using a 5-act structure. So I imagine, given the starting point, you're using somewhat of a classic hero's tale structure for it.
Can you go further into detail what you mean by hero's tale?
Hero's journey. In 1 second here, and I'll just
Okay. No,
yeah.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
No, it's not. Again, with the hero's journey, there's not really the same archetypes present as there might be in the hero's journey. He doesn't really have a lot of people guiding. He doesn't really have anybody guiding him, honestly. He's learning everything by making a lot of mistakes and just trying to get through. He doesn't really have anything that fits the archetype of the artifact. Like there's no MacGuffins in the game. There's no attempt at saving the world from something. It's just a kid getting started in a very dangerous profession.
On the MacGuffin, one could say that everything he picks up is almost a MacGuffin given its usage in the puzzle situation or figuring it out.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. I mean, when I think of the item system, I really think of it more like the Phoenix Wright investigations because you're picking up an item for one monster, but that doesn't mean the next monster will have the same rule, will have anything same rules or even react at all to the current items you have. I mean, some of the items you pick up earlier in the game, they do come in useful later, but mostly it's every monster is its own segmented experience.
How do you make sure that in those cases that the inventory doesn't become overflowing? Do you remove the items if they don't have any future use?
Yes, again, I've been working on it for 3 years, so I already have everything set up where items that are useful stay in play. Items that I'm not planning on using again, they're either destroyed or lost or something. It's the course of the inventory over the 5 acts is already planned out.
And how many items are there in the game in total?
There's a lot of items. I think the most you have at one point is about 12, if I recall correctly. But I'd say there's at least 30 items in the game.
And each one of them represents several different factors that you have to consider for dealing with the monster.
Right, which is where some of the fun of the puzzle sections of the game come in. Is that each item has multiple properties, so one item might trigger two different rules from one monster, or one item, it might have a property that will come in later for another monster. Like you think, oh, I got this earlier, I know I already have this, but then it has another property that triggers something else, and it's just doing a lot of experimenting like that and figuring out what item does what.
Yeah, and so with the items, how many properties do most of them have?
About 3 or 4. And I'm not saying one of the properties might be a red herring. Like one of them might be just kind of information I'm putting in there that isn't really going to come into play later.
Yeah, when they're used like that, is there any of them that basically counteract themselves? Like platinum makes the monster walk around, but if it's old, it can walk right through it.
No, I don't. I don't do anything like that. It's none of the items are going to be completely useless in the game. Every item will have a use. It's just that their uses will change depending on what monster you're going after.
Yeah, and with there being different contracts, I imagine then that depending on which path you're going down, I imagine that the game will change on which items you get.
Yeah, of course. The inventory you have is static between the chapters. Like you keep all the items, but again, you might have an option of 2 different monsters for one route, and then the routes coalesce back into one main route for the next chapter. So suddenly you've got another contract, and your ability to deal with it has changed depending on what you were doing in the last chapter, which routes you took, and which decisions you made.
So when writing the game, what was your process with each of the chapters?
Well, I did things in a very broad stroke. First of all, I knew what the general pace of the story I wanted to be. I know what I wanted to get out there, and then after writing a very broad overview, then I started narrowing things down a little and narrowing things down a little more until I started writing the actual chapters themselves, which is what we have now.
So with the puzzles, how did you go about creating the rules for the various monsters?
As you've probably seen in the prologue, it's an isometric game. So I was thinking a lot of things that have to do with mobility and a lot of things that have to do with, the monsters will have some special abilities, and you'll have items that might modify how those abilities work. A lot of it's a lot of it's really based off of I don't know if you're familiar with JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, the comic.
No, I'm not.
Okay. Well, here's a brief overview about why I like that specific comic. Is again, let's take another example. Dragon Ball. You of course know Dragon Ball, right?
Yeah.
Well, the problem I have with when I was watching Dragon Ball, even as a kid, is that Goku's solution to every problem was just to get strong, was just to become stronger, and then he'd beat the bad guy. But the difference in JoJo's is he has sort of each character has sort of one ability that doesn't really change much, except for well, I guess in Steel Ball Run it changes, but their ability doesn't really change much. How they defeat all the bad guys they come across or all the monsters of the week they come across is that they have to be clever about it, and they have to figure out how they're going to use their ability to counteract the other ability and stuff. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's what really the inspiration was for the battle sequences, is that you've got this plan, you think you know what you're going to do, you think you know what items are going to do, then something's going to go wrong, and then you have to figure out what you're going to do from there, and then that's going to go wrong again, and then you're going to have to improvise with something, or you're going to have to find something in the background that you can use. But another inspiration for it was actually You Don't Know Jack, the quiz show game, if you're familiar with that.
I've heard of it, but I do not know it.
Well, one thing that You Don't Know Jack has is it has this feature called the wrong answer of the game, where every answer, it has right answers that kind of sound similar to each other, and then it has wrong answers, and then some of the wrong answers are just completely ridiculous. But You Don't Know Jack has something called the wrong answer of the game, where at the beginning of the game they tell you like, hey, if you see an option that has something to do with vitamins and you pick that, that will be not only the right answer, but you'll get bonus points for that. So the entire game, you're trying to think about vitamins, and you're answering all these different questions that are distracting you. But then one answer will pop up that looks completely wrong, but it's about vitamins, and that gets you the bonus points. And that's what's going on in Walkerman. Is there's a couple wrong answer of the game moments where whenever you're asked to make a decision, there's some right answers that look similar, and then there's completely wrong answers. But every once in a while, you'll remember something that you learned earlier in the investigation that you kind of forgot about, and if you pick that answer, you'll be able to advance through large sections of the battle.
Yeah. So with the battles themselves, there is in the first one at least a lot of focus on mobility and moving around. Is that the general setup for most of them?
The general setup for most of them is that for each monster, you're going to want to trap it, and you're going to want to disable it. So you're going to want to affect its mobility so it can't get away from you or can't get close to you. But each monster also has these special abilities that they have that you're also going to want to find a way to disable. So it's kind of a two-factor. You want to disable its movement, and then you want to stop whatever its abilities are from harming you or helping it before you actually go in to try to attack it.
And what happens if the player tries to go in to attack it while it still has abilities? Will they stop them, or will they be forced to reload?
I don't do a lot of one mistake kills. Like I didn't really like that whenever I was started playing visual novels. I didn't like it when you're given two options and one of them completely kills you without any hints of what you're supposed to pick. But so you can make a mistake and then you have a chance to recover. But if if the monster is completely mobile and it's swinging at you and you try to get in, no, you're gonna have to reload if you try that.
All right. So with the monsters, what type of inspiration did you use for creating them?
I wanted a set theme for them. Like I wanted them all to look somewhat similar, but mostly it was just the old folk tales about old folk monsters, and they had all these bizarre rules, like you spill pumpkin seeds on the ground, and the vampire has to pick up and count all the pumpkin seeds, and it's just these ridiculous rules that kind of are I think there's some rule about Japanese ghosts where they can't cross bridges that are diagonal. So Japan's gardens and Japan's sort of botanical gardens have all these weird zigzag bridges everywhere in case you're trying to run from a ghost, I guess.
That is rather odd.
Yeah, so something like that. But I wanted there to be a theme to the monsters, so they all kind of look somewhat similar to the monster that you saw in the prologue. They're all somewhat human, but kind of deformed, and they have like coal black skin that kind of oozes this pus everywhere and glowing eyes and stuff. That's the basic aesthetic of the monsters.
All right. So, what the world? You said that you based it on feudalist society to some degree. Was there any particular sources you used to help create it?
It's kind of a hodgepodge, honestly. It's it's got a lot of different things going in there. The system is basically based off of, yeah, there's nobles and then there's serfs, and the nobles own the serfs. Like if you're a serf, you're their property unless you buy your way out if you decide to enter into business or whatever. And then there's the clergy, and they're kind of like attached onto the side of the nobles. But one thing that I really wanted to get with when I was designing the setting for Midgard is oh, I just forgot what I was about to say. It's can you repeat that question one more time?
Uh, beyond just the beyond just the general feudal setup, was there any particular inspiration and sources that you used there?
Basically just doing research on other cultures around the world and how they work. Like I didn't want somebody to show up in Midgard and have it be like 2015 America where everybody is, they're paying rent and they're buying their own food and everything. I wanted the setting to be somewhat different. Like I wanted them to not be relying on a an economy as much as they're relying on, the nobles are in charge of the farmers, and they're also in charge of the people living in the city. So the nobles are in charge of, making sure everybody's fed instead of everybody buying their own food, stuff like that.
Yeah. So you also released a recent sample of the in-game music, I believe.
Mhm.
So how has that been going so far?
With the music, I've been working with Walker Peterson, who's a really talented musician who has actually went back and the first tracks were very loud and very active, which was good. It was good music, but it wasn't really great for reading. So we had to go back and change things to make them a little more ambient. But aside from that, we also wanted to, anytime there's not a lot of reading going on, we also wanted to sort of branch out and experiment with the music, which is where you got the ending theme for the prologue, which was thrash metal, and then the Ursary show tune, which is like something out of Disney, is where we're trying to experiment with the music direction.
So how are you trying to use the music and art to help tell the story beyond just the words?
A lot of something you learn when you're making a visual novel is you're not writing a book. Like you don't want to just tell the player everything that's going on. So I originally released the original prologue back in February, which had a lot more exposition in it, but it was kind of annoying players. Like I'm describing things that they're looking at. So I went back and I cut it down a little bit, and I'm probably going to keep cutting things down as I'm plugging the art assets into the rest of the game. I'm going to be editing things and making sure that I'm not, boring players with too much descriptions of stuff they can already see. But yeah, a big part of the visual novel is, you're not writing a book, but you're also not directing a movie. You have to kind of find a very comfortable zone between describing things and showing things.
All right. So what inspired you to get into making a visual novel in the first place of the types of games?
Well, first I came up with the idea for the game, and then I was trying to figure out, how would this work. And at that point, I was already getting into visual novels, and I was thinking, I have the option of either making this an adventure game or a visual novel, and I kind of decided to go with the visual novel. I really wanted to try making one, not just because it would really fit well for the game I'm trying to make, but also because, again, it's the ease of making a visual novel is much greater compared to the ease of making an adventure game. I mean, with an adventure game, I'd be having to spend a lot of time programming the gameplay elements of it, like you're walking around and then having the player looking at things that aren't really necessary, just the fluff. But with a visual novel, I could just go straight through and I can get the message I want to the player and also the gameplay I want them to experience without having to worry about doing extra stuff on the side, which would make it very difficult for a one man army when it comes to programming like I am. But that's not to say I would never want to make an adventure game. I'd probably, if I was going to make something more complicated than a visual novel, I'd probably need to get one or two more people on the team besides the artist and musician to help me do stuff.
All right. That's So, how has your experience been on creating Walkerman so far?
Uh, very, very long and grueling, honestly. I mean, it's been a very long process of hammering things out, and then it's only gotten tougher once I actually started needing to make the game. Because I mean, when it's easy to let things get away from you when you're just making the script. But now that I actually need to worry about the art asset costs, I actually need to worry about, would it be feasible for me to code this thing that the player's only gonna see once? Now it's starting to get I'd say for the past 6 months, it's been ramping up in the difficulty. But I mean, I'm not really having any hardships. They're making it so I don't think I would be able to complete Walkerman. It's just I'm having to cut some things out of the game that would have otherwise been, kind of just a useless add-on that wouldn't have really done anything.
So, have you had to try anything that you really wanted to make sure was in the game?
Everything I wanted to be in the game was in the game. From the outset, I was very careful to avoid feature creep, although it got in there a little bit. Like originally, I was going to have, in addition to the inventory, you're going to have to worry about money, and you're going to have to be, worrying about buying food and paying rent and stuff. But it was just kind of a hassle in game and wasn't really doing much. So I just decided to cut it out of there and just focus on the investigations and battling the monsters.
And in the game, the money works better as a narrative pressure for the most part.
It was supposed to be similar to Papers, Please, where I was going to drive the plot along by, making sure that the player is always in a stage of worrying about money. So it would make, taking these deals more tempting. But it really wasn't worth the hassle. It wasn't really, it was nothing I couldn't just do with narrative. And it really, I don't know what the word is, like ludo narrative or something that a
Mm-hmm.
lot of game people have been throwing around lately. It wasn't really that strong, honestly. There wasn't really a lot of difference between showing the player that they only have like 3 coppers left and having Jorgen say, wow, I only have 3 coppers left. It wasn't really that much of a difference when I was playing through it.
Most of the time, when people use ludo narrative dissonance, it's not used correctly. I've noticed it tends to be one of the most misused phrases in there. It's basically when there's a conflict between gameplay and the narrative elements. However, it doesn't sound like what you're discussing necessarily will cause that dissonance because you're still not going to be like if you were walking around with a pouch full of very rich stuff while complaining about being poor, that would cause that type of dissonance. But that doesn't sound like what a lot of Jurgen's stuff that he's going to be carrying around as tools is very relatively small things because you're wanting to hit as many rules as you can while you're carrying it with you.
Yeah, it's again, I don't know if ludonarrative is the correct word for it, but the emotions made by the gameplay versus emotions just made by telling you what's going on weren't enough for me to keep, hassling around trying to make sure the player is always wanting for money. Because I mean, what I do not want to happen is have it like in Baldur's Gate or Pillars of Eternity, where very quickly you get a large amount of money, and then it's like, why would my character ever be worried about money? I'm rich as hell.
Well, while in Baldur's Gate that happens, in Baldur's Gate 2, at least for the first couple acts, you do have consistent money concerns given the Shadow Thief issue and having to get the payment there and all the fighting in Am.
Yeah, by that point in Baldur's Gate 2, I don't know what I was doing, but I think I was taking every side quest I could get my hands on. Like I was doing all the Stronghold starting quests, and when that little kid was asking me for money, it was like chump change to me at that point.
Uh, so, what has been the greatest challenge for you with the game?
Really, just organizing. I mean, making and coding the game and writing the game's plot was pretty easy, but what's really challenging is getting getting it out there, which means that you have to be working with artists who are often on the other end of the world, and you can't talk to them or see them regularly. They might be on a completely reverse time schedule from you. You're spending time waiting for emails in order to get moving again. Like you're running into roadblocks where you need somebody to produce something so that you can put it in there, so you can start tinkering with it and working out what you want to do. And it's really the more moving parts that get into there, like the more artists you have, and the more you need to talk with your musician, and the more you're trying to code. You're like, for instance, that Ursary show tune was just a nightmare to get ready because I was trying to work with my musician and the vocalist that he was talking to, and I was not able to be physically present for all of it, so I was not able to help organize anything. They were basically on their own, which was a very painful process to have to kind of, you know, watch for weeks as they're trying to work things out and emailing you the details of what they're talking about.
All right. So you've said that the prologue is about 1/12 of a regular session or the act. How long do you expect the game to be on the whole?
About a medium visual novel length. It's hard for me to tell because, again, reading speeds are different for everyone. Depending on what decisions you're making, the battles might be going fast or slow. The prologue, I want to say that would take somebody like 20 minutes to play through, right?
Yeah, that would be about it.
Okay, so yeah, I'm expecting it to clock in depending on how long the battles take, depending on how fast of a reader you are, whether you're spending time looking at the CGs or whether you're just hitting the space bar. I want to say it'd probably be around 15 hours. 15 hours for an average reader who's taking a somewhat long route through the battles.
So of the battles, what beyond just trying to create a challenge of the monsters, were there any particular notes you were trying to hit?
What do you mean by notes I'm trying to hit?
Narrative or tone, different type of things in the story with it.
I spent a lot of the story, you know, doing split between slice of life and like the slice of life of living in Midgard, and also the politics that are going on, and you know, being dirt poor in a city that's, you know, really not based around you being able to buy things as much as it's based around you being part of a community. So when I got to the battles, I wanted to kind of switch gears a little bit and do something more like like an action movie or an anime or something where you're taking a break from all the politics and whatnot, and you're getting into you know, there's scenes where surprises are happening and you're figuring things out, and you're you know, the music is more upbeat than the ambient stuff that you hear during the visual novel sections. Really, I just wanted to switch gears and turn it into more of an action game, an action puzzler than a visual novel at that point. Like, I wanted players to actually get some excitement out of things.
All right. So in the first section, there's obviously some mysteries already set up. You're obviously trying to lay down a lot of ideas there. Like your father's wound there is, I think, my guess is that's supposed to be rather foreshadowing, even and possibly an answer there relatively early on. So what type of hints are you trying to, how long are you trying to set up things for people to figure things out early, and will that allow them to get through things if they do figure it out beforehand?
I would doubt if anybody. I mean, I did set up the foreshadowing in the prologue, but really, I would doubt if anybody would be able to figure out what's going on just from there. I mean, yes, the father's wound on his hand is very important, particularly in one specific route, and the appearance of the monster in the woods and the things that it was doing that wasn't really expected of it, the things that Jorgen was confused about, is probably the main plot of the game. Arguably the main plot of the game is you know, the things that he doesn't know about what he's doing in this profession, and the, you know, the rumors he's heard but he doesn't believe, or he doesn't know what to think about it. That would be probably the big foreshadowing, but I doubt anyone's going to be able to pick up on what I'm getting at until probably the end of Act 1, beginning of Act 2.
So I don't think I have any other questions here. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, that's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you. So you can see Walkerman currently on Kickstarter or Green Light. There are links to it in the article above, and it's on there for another 20 odd days. So check it out if you're interested in visual novels or venture games. Thank you, and have a good day.
All right. Thanks for having me.